A year ago, when I started this podcast, one of my besties, Debbie, asked me to do a podcast episode on SANE nursing. To be honest, I didn't know what SANE nursing was. I thought she meant like sane versus insane. But she went on to explain to me that it stood for Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner, a form of forensics nursing. For a year, I've been trying to find the right person to interview on this topic, and I finally have. Recently, I was on Clubhouse, my new favorite social media platform, and I met Maie McKenzie. I heard her speaking on another topic, looked at her profile, saw that she was a SANE nurse, and reached out to her via email. She was gracious enough to grant me an interview, and you are not going to want to miss this episode. Debbie, this one's for you. Welcome to the Stay at Home Nurse Podcast. I'm your host, Deanna Cooper Gillingham. For over 25 years, I've strived to use my nurse credentials to find work that fit my lifestyle. Whether it was raising my 4 children and 3 fur babies, traveling the world, or moving to Mexico and living on the Caribbean Sea. Sometimes I succeeded, and sometimes I failed, but I always learned from the experience. Now, I want to help you by sharing what worked and what didn't work. There are so many opportunities out there for nurses today. The Stay at Home Nurse Podcast will inspire and equip you to have a nursing career that is meaningful and supports your lifestyle. Now let's get started. Welcome to this week's episode of the Stay at Home Nurse Podcast. Today I have a requested topic and I have a special guest, Maie McKenzie. Maie is a registered nurse with over 23 years of experience, a lot of initials behind her name, so I'm not going to read those all off. She has worked in the area of emergency, trauma, risk management, leadership, and forensic nursing as a sexual assault nurse examiner. As a sexual assault nurse examiner, Maie has functioned in both the emergency department and community rape crisis centers. Maie McKenzie is an accomplished and experienced registered nurse, community volunteer, victims advocate, and trained sexual assault nurse examiner. When she's not on the job, Maie volunteers and advocates for survivors of sexual assault, rape, domestic violence, and the individuals who are experiencing homelessness. She has volunteered for food banks, crisis pregnancy centers, homeless organizations, and she was a board member for the Inner Truth Project, a center which strives to change the conversation surrounding sexual violence and help survivors find their voice. And I am so honored and proud to have somebody like Maie to talk to us today about this very important topic and possibly career move for some nurses. So Maie, welcome.
Thank you, Dana. So happy to be here. Appreciate you inviting me on.
I'm so happy that you took my email and agreed to do this podcast. So I want to kind of start off with finding out what inspired you to work in forensic nursing and specifically as a sexual assault nurse examiner.
In 2014, I was working in an emergency department, and one of our nurses brought this program to the emergency department. I saw on the board in the lounge where they were asking if anyone was interested in this training. I went to the informational session and jumped on board. My background, I was a victim of sexual abuse. I've had several members of my family and people I know. At the time when I agreed to do it, I didn't have that in the back of my head. But later on, processing, I can see where my life experience have led me to this. I did not report my abuse. So there was no, what can I say? There was no working through it or seeking justice. The first incident was when I was about 12. And this was an adult member of the family. So, nothing was done. There were other children in my family where this happened to adults. And so in a sense, I feel like I'm helping the survivors achieve the justice I never sought or received, if that makes
Wow. Wow. So at this time, had you been doing any of the volunteer work that you are doing now?
at the Crisis Pregnancy Center. That was the
Okay.
only one I was doing at that time.
Okay. So this was something that kind of just spoke to you when you saw this.
Yes,
And okay. Wow. As nurses, we want to help, but to kind of have to go through all of that again, I'm sure that took a lot of courage and a lot of strength.
yes. But
Yeah.
it also helped me to process my trauma that I realized I hadn't done.
And I would think for the victims that you are helping, you're not another nurse that's just sitting there telling them what they have to do, but you can actually say that you've been through it, which I'm sure for
Been through
them
it, right?
is very comforting for them.
Very.
So you saw this post on the job board and or this notification. And what was the next step? Like what did you just decide to start seeking information or were you like I'm all in? What was the process like?
Well, the notice was inviting interested nurses to an informational session. So after I went to the informational session, got all the necessary feedback, and I'm like, oh, good, I'm on board. Then I did all the necessary training, which started with a 40-hour didactic, and then clinicals like learning the speculum exams, practicing with all the experienced nurses and the physicians in the emergency room. I was fortunate to be trained on speculum exams by the emergency room physicians. And so I've been doing that since 2014.
It sounds like the training is pretty intense and it's not just like we get for a lot of training as nurses where they just kind of throw you in and say, go ahead and watch me do one and then you can go ahead and you're great at it.
Absolutely not. The didactic is 40 hours, and my training was Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. And then, I followed the physicians on the speculum exam. After that, I had to return for the clinicals, and this was proctored by a credentialed, very experienced individual on live humans, the speculum exam. So, and plus the forensic evidence collection, documentation, and working with a team of professionals who deals with sexual assault.
And did you get some training also on the emotional aspects or was it just on the forensics?
On both.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Okay.
that emotional, as nurses, that's a big part of what we do anyway.
Right. Yes. And I think it's probably more comforting for a nurse to do this than a doctor, even just because we have that reputation of trust that, we're the most trusted profession.
Yes. And I've encountered many physicians who do not like to deal with sexual assault victims. They don't want to go to court either.
Wow.
I know some nurses don't want either, but I've met a lot of physicians who are like very hesitant.
So that leads us kind of to the next question. What does this job entail? Is this just something that you do while you're working in the ER? You mentioned going to court. Tell me a little bit about what this job entails.
Okay, being a sexual assault nurse examiner, first you care for the patient holistically. You check for the physical injuries, make sure there is nothing emergent that needs to be dealt with medically, because that comes before anything else, and make sure the patient is stable. Being a sexual assault examiner provides us with more time and the victim, which a specialized person to really care for them. We interview them about the incident, and the story they relate guides our evidence collection. Say, for example, oh, he kissed me on my neck, we'll swab there. We take photographs of any injuries. Documentation is very important also. as the case progresses in court, we may be called to testify.
And have you been called to testify?
I have. I remember my last case, as I mentioned about the kiss on the neck. The survivor had told me that the perpetrator had kissed her on the neck, and I swabbed there. And for some reason, that was the only DNA evidence that was found, and that actually helped send the perpetrator to jail.
That must have been a very rewarding feeling to know that
very rewarding feeling. So sexual assault nurse examiners do play a very important role in gaining justice for victims and helping them heal.
So how often do you have to go to court?
Most cases do not end up in court. So it may be years or never. Some sexual assault nurse examiners never go to court.
Okay.
Because most cases are settled outside court.
Okay. I'm not sure if that's good or bad.
Well, when the perpetrator is presented with the evidence, they plead.
Oh, so well, then that's good.
Yes, that's the reason.
So it's good if the victim never has to go and testify in front of them.
Exactly.
But it's not good if it's because the case is dropped for lack of evidence. So that's what
right.
Yeah, okay.
And that does happen sometimes.
Okay.
Unfortunately, yes.
So I'm assuming that this type of a position is something that when you're working in the ER, because you have this training, if one of these patients would come in, you would be assigned that patient. Or are you on call, or how does that work?
My current emergency room does not do sexual assault.
Okay.
My previous emergency room where I worked as a sexual assault nurse examiner, if one of the trained nurses in the emergency room, when the victim comes in, then we're assigned. On the days when there are no one on shift, then we have on call. So we have 24 on call nurses.
Okay. I get it. So what, you've been doing this for quite a while, and I'm sure it's one of those things where you hope you're never needed, but then,
right.
But when you are, you're glad that you have the training that you can actually come in and help and be an advocate for that patient. What is and I caution I'm trying to figure out how to say this in the right way, but what is the most, I guess, rewarding part of the job? I don't want to say the best part of the job because there's no good part, it's not a good situation to be in. But for you, what makes you keep going back and continue to do this?
I believe the victims need someone there just for them. Someone who understands and will provide them with the best care. Not that another nurse or another doctor wouldn't, but because of the specialized training, I believe we are more equipped to provide this particular victim with exactly what they need.
And how do you work with law enforcement? Do you work alongside them? How does that play out?
Okay. Law enforcement is a part of the sexual assault response team. There are specialized officers who are trained in response to sexual violence. In my hospital where I worked, most of the times the patients would come in with the police. If at the time they come to our emergency room, the police is not yet notified and they want to notify, then we'll have the police called. Where I am currently is with the center in the community, Victim Services of Central Florida, and most of our victims are brought to us by the police. So the police does their investigation. They also look at what we document, and then they take our evidence collection kit to the crime lab.
So do you work closely with them?
Oh, absolutely. The police is a part of the team. Okay. We are part of the team as well.
I know when you watch TV, and I bite my tongue when I say that because I don't like watching TV shows about nurses and what we do because they never get it right. But when you watch shows on TV, it looks like the police are the ones collecting all the evidence and doing all of the work. And I'm thinking that that's probably not the case. I'm thinking that's probably your job to do most of that.
That is not the case here. In this case, we're the one who does the, and they may do photographs. Police, they do photographs also, but a part of our evidence collection is our photographs and the DNA swabs.
So what would you recommend to a nurse that's out there listening and is interested in doing something like this? What would you recommend that they do next? What would the next step be?
Look for training in their state. Like in Florida, we have the Florida Council Against Sexual Violence, and they do provide the 40-hour training, whatever training is required. My training was 40-hour training, and clinicals were through them. So they can also look up the International Association of Forensic Nurses online, and they will also point them in the right direction.
Awesome. And one more question about this in particular. Is this a full-time job for a nurse, or is this something that they kind of just do on the side, or it's an adjunct to their full-time job?
It's not a full-time job. Otherwise, I would be doing it. Okay. Because I would, yes. I'd really liked, like now I'm a contract for the victim services when it was part of my job in the emergency department.
Okay.
So it's alongside.
Okay. Yeah. All the research that I have done on it, it always looked like it was a contract position because obviously, thank God, there are not people coming in 24/7 needing this. Yes. Okay. Okay. And anything else that you want to talk about that before I kind of switch gears a little bit here?
It's very rewarding, and I would recommend it to any nurse who would want to pursue it. All is required at least 2 years of nursing experience. You do not need to be certified. There is a certification through the International Association of Forensic Nurses. You just need to get the training. Some nurses spend their whole career as a sexual assault nurse examiner and not getting certified. You need at least 300 hours before you can sit the certification exam. Wow. And that 300 hours involves being on call plus direct patient care. Okay.
And what is the certification called for those that are interested?
It's SANE. Well, they have the adolescents, which is SANE A, and SANE P for the certified sexual assault pediatric, because there are two different certifications.
Okay. Okay. And the training that you received, was it for both adults and children, or?
No, I received adults. I don't do children, pediatrics.
Okay.
And that's my choice.
Okay.
I don't think I could do the pediatrics.
Yeah, I think it would be hard doing adults. Pediatrics would be very difficult. I can definitely understand that.
But there are some who do both.
Okay, very good. So you gave us some really good information here. And I'm glad that my friend Debbie asked me to do this topic, and that I'm so glad that you took the time to be with us today. And
it was my pleasure.
Even answered my random email that I sent you after I heard you on Clubhouse. So I know that this is not all you're doing. You are currently working on getting your legal nurse consultant business set up. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, this is something I have been interested in for years, to become a legal nurse consultant. So finally in 2020, I decided it's time. So I got the training. This is another field where you can be certified, but you don't have to be certified. And like the SANE, you have to be practicing for a certain number of hours before you can get the certification. So I got the training, and I'm currently setting up my office and my business. So looking forward to getting this going fully in a couple months.
Okay. And I'm probably going to want to have you come back and talk a little bit more about that. But for right now, is this legal nurse consultant, are there specialty areas of this, or is this just a general practice type of?
Well, it's another area. What a legal nurse consultant does is review medical records either for plaintiff or defense attorneys. You can work with insurance companies and hospitals, risk management.
I guess what I was thinking was more like, is this something that would tie into what you're doing with your sexual assault? Like an attorney may reach out to you and ask you for your expertise on this since you have this training, or is this going to be something totally different?
Yes, attorneys may reach out to me because I can also use my SANE experience for criminal cases.
Okay. And is that something that you're interested in doing, or?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. Because I see, when I look at your bio and I see everything that you're doing and how vested you are in caring for these people, it just made sense that this would be a logical next step for you. So I'm really excited to check back with you in a few months and see how this is going.
Okay,
and I know this is another topic that people are very interested in. Nurses are very interested in. So we're going to circle back again, if that's okay with you. And
it's okay.
Any last thoughts or advice for anybody?
Jump aboard. Don't hesitate. It's rewarding, and we need more SANE nurses. We really do.
Okay, well, you heard her. Go ahead, look into it. If it's something that you're thinking about, this may be that little push that you need to get you to go ahead and look a little further into it and then take the leap and help out those women and people that need. I'm sure it's not just women, but the people who need an advocate for them.
Yes, and it's not just women. There are male victims as well.
Okay, thank you for correcting me. I appreciate that. I think we just naturally assume, but it's not. It's men and boys also. So yes. Okay. Well, Marie, again, thank you so much for spending your afternoon with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me, and it was a pleasure.
Once again, I want to thank Marie for being so gracious and speaking with us so openly and honestly about this sensitive topic. As I mentioned in the intro, I met Marie on Clubhouse. If you're on Clubhouse, make sure you follow me. I'm at D. Gillingham. If you have a friend who you think would enjoy this episode, please share it with them. And also, hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Until next week, adios from beautiful Puerto Aventuras, Mexico.